Now that we're satisfied with the seat height, we're going ahead and assess where the seat is forward or back relative to the cranks or the bottom bracket. We want to make sure that we get the knee over the pedal spindle at the right place when the knee is as far forward as it's going to get. I've drawn the line here on screen and we can use that, but it's really more accurate to do it with a weight or a plumb bob. So we're going to go ahead. Okay, what we can see is that on the left side at least, the center of the plumb bob is slightly behind the center of the pedal. So in order to correct that, we would normally move the seat forward a little bit, which I am going to do. Okay, I'm using the plumb bob to measure Tony's knee over spindle when the pedals are parallel to the ground. Now I've predicted that his right knee will not come as far forward as his left knee, so I'm measuring that one first. And indeed, we're about a centimeter behind the center of the pedal. Probably what we're going to do is move the seat forward a centimeter. That's going to push the left knee out too far. And then we'll adjust his cleat on the left side so that it lines that side back up. So now I'm measuring the left knee, and actually what we're seeing is that the leg length discrepancy in the femur is not really affecting his fit on the bike. So I'm going to move the seat forward a centimeter, and that should line up both knees. So now I've moved the seat forward a centimeter, and we can see that the plumb bob is over the center of the pedal. We'll check the right one in a minute, but it's probably going to be the same. Now at this point, I want to make a couple of comments. One is that we measured a difference in the femur length on the table, but it's not affecting its fit on the bike. So we don't want to fix something that's not causing a problem. If we found a problem, we know what the cause was, and we know how to correct it. But just because we saw a problem in the physical assessment doesn't mean it automatically means a problem on the bike. So it's very important that we actually measure what's going on the bike before we make any corrections. Second thing is, Tony's on a saddle that is the right width for the width of his sit bones that we measured before, and it's a stable saddle. So we're seeing consistent measurements. But at this point, sometimes with a rider, I'll see inconsistent measurements without changing anything. So one time I'll measure the knee angle too high, and the next time too low. Then when I do the fore aft, sometimes the knee's too far forward, sometimes it's too far back. That's a clue that the saddle's not giving the rider a neutral platform. And so he's moving around, consciously or unconsciously, to try and find a stable spot on the saddle. And if not, he's probably using some of his core muscles to stabilize himself on the saddle rather than letting those muscles be involved in the act of pedaling. So now we're paying attention to a couple of things. One is we're looking at the front end of the bike to see if the handlebar height and the reach of the handlebars fits the athlete's body and his angle of flexibility. So one of the things we're going to see is, if he comes to the top of his pedal stroke, I'm going to measure this angle. And this is the angle that the hip makes with the sacrum, or the lower back. I'm not looking at the torso angle, that's a different measurement. 92 degrees. Okay, well we measured Tony's hip angle at over 130. So Tony's not limiting his power by this angle being so closed. But if someone else had a maximum hip angle on the table of closer to 90 degrees, then we need to raise the handlebars because we need to open this angle up. Otherwise, he's not effectively using the beginning of his power stroke because it's too close to the range and limitation of that joint. We're looking at the curvature between his upper back and his sacrum. Okay, so what I really want here is I want a continuous line, and what we have actually is a curve. So he's got his sacrum tucked under him. It makes it harder for him to use the glute muscles, which is the strongest muscles in the body. So there's a couple ways we can get this right. Normally, the problem is caused by his seat not being back far enough. But if we measured that, we know that the seat is where it needs to be for the length of Tony's femurs. Second thing we could do is we could ask the athlete to rotate his pelvis under him so that he pushes out that lower back. Now that's kind of an uncomfortable position, but you can learn to do it. And the third thing, we're going to bring the front end of that bike out a little bit more, allow Tony to stretch out a little bit more, and so he can get that plane of his back much more in line. Okay, so now we have the cyclist a little bit more stretched out, and we've got a sacrum at a closer angle to his upper back. So we've got a continuity there. We're not binding the glute muscles. We're just going to take a quick look at the handlebar height, and I'm looking to see, is his upper body at an angle that he can sustain? Is there a lot of tension in the shoulders? as we bumped up here in the neck. This all is pretty relaxed. So go ahead and go down the drop. The athlete should be able to use all positions of the handlebar. If the handlebar is too low and you can only use the tops, and then you're not really getting the full benefit of having a road bike. If the handlebars are too high, and then you're not really getting the benefit of a full road bike because you're just using the drops. We're looking at video of Tony pedaling from the front plane, and what we're going to watch is what do his kneecaps do when they go up and down. And we've drawn a reference line. So what we see happening is we've got a circular motion that when the knee comes up, it goes out. As it comes down, it comes in toward the bike. This is exaggerated by some of the things we measured on the foot, and that is that 4-foot tilt, and in some cases people with a high arch collapsing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to neutralize his shoes by putting special footbeds in there. And in this case, I'm going to put a different footbed in the left and right because he's got one flat foot and one with a normal arch. In addition, I'm going to put in something called a varus wedge, which is a little piece that's fatter on one side that helps to fill in that extra space we saw underneath the feet when Tony was kneeling on the table. Once right now. We're going to put a footbed in each shoe to support the arch from collapsing. We know he's got arch on the left foot. The other is it's got what's called a metatarsal button. Without going into too much technical talk, that keeps that nerve that runs to the front of the foot from being crushed, helping to prevent the numbness in the toes or cold feet or a lot of symptoms that cyclists get. Now, because Tony has one flat foot and one normal arch, I've used two different heights of footbed. In addition, these are varus wedges. They're thin on one side, thick on the other. Thin on the outside of the foot, thick on the inside of the foot. So that's going to help compensate for that 4-foot angulation we saw on the table earlier. Since I measured more 4-foot angulation on the right, I'm going to put 2 wedges in here. And we'll adjust this based on what we see on the video. And it goes underneath the footbed. If cyclist shoes are tight-fitting already, and putting those wedges in there would make it impossible to wear, and we have different kind of shims that we can put beneath the cleat. Okay, I want to show what happens to a knee joint when this kind of motion happens. So we see that the cyclist is loading his knees on the power stroke with the knees bent inward. Okay, this is a regular knee joint. This is our patella, that's the kneecap, and that's the groove it fits in. It fits exactly in that groove, and it's filled with a fluid that's very, very slippery. So as long as this knee goes up and down, straight up and down, doesn't matter how hard you push on it, the knee's happy. But if you start loading it to the side, what you see is a patella starts to rub on the side of the bottom of the femur bone. And that's where we get a lot of cycling injuries. Also, you're stretching these tendons, you're stretching the IT band to one side. That's one of the reasons for the tight IT bands. So a lot of things detrimental can happen if the knees are not tracking straight up and down. Neutralize the footbeds, and before I even show you what happens to the knees, I wanted to show what happens in the power output. So here we have a much more even curve, and we've got very close power production left and right. 1 to 2% difference occasionally, but a much better look. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the knees on the video. Okay, so we can see we've made some improvements here. We're still not 100% where we need to be, but you can see that the left knee is tracking much closer to straight up and down the line. The right one, though, we still got some problems in the motion. Now there's another thing at play here that's probably the final factor, and that is every cyclist has an ideal width for his feet to be apart, and that's how they line up with the hips and the knees. If the pedals put you at a different width, then again, the knee's going to be the victim. So in this case, most likely, Tony's pedals are farther apart than where his feet want to be, and that leads to a little bit of the side-to-side knee motion. So if I could line up his feet, and there's several ways to do this, so that they're closer together, then we'd probably get the last bit of that knee wobble out of it.